Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, February 12th, 2021. Okay, the mute button on the microphone wasn't cooperating this morning, so it's like here at home, if I was recording this thing, you would hear it. Hello. Hey, everybody. Oh, damn, the thing's on. Hey, everybody. Still not on. But now it is. So here in the fake studio, it was very entertaining. For the rest of you, you might have wondered, was there going to be a show today? Yes, yes, and yes. Answer to all three questions. I don't remember what the other two were, but we have the answers for you. It is Friday. That's good news. The impeachment trial continues today, and in fact, it is day 4 of the impeachment trial, which, there's no particular tradition that day 4 is the beginning of the defense presentation or anything like that, but it just happens to be the case here. Who knows? It might even have been the case in the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Remember, we're on impeachment 2 here. So yesterday, House managers wrapped things up in their presentation, resting, I guess, their case in chief yesterday. And by most accounts, certainly the presentations went very well, very powerful, well done, convincing if you have half a brain and were willing to use it. But are there critiques of at least the strategy? Yes, as it happens, there are. You may have spent all day admiring the performances or praising the performances. Maybe you have a critique or a bone to pick or something quite like that. Somewhere in the range of major strategic blunder to small bone to pick, and you can chime in as well. But we have Armando. When it comes to chiming in on matters like this, we have Armando who has his critique to present, and I guess earlier is better for him, so we're going to have him in just a couple of minutes. And he sent me, by way of setup, this piece from the Washington Post, and perhaps we should dive right in and share it. But before I do, I might as well dive right in and share the morning post, the morning tweet from Bill up in Portland, Maine. The Kagro in the Morning Show is live now. That's what we're doing right here. If you really dig down deep and find out what's going on at the heart of what this babble is all about, it's the show. And it's the defense's turn today in the impeachment trial. And Kagro X, me, David Waldman, ponders whether they'll make the Chewbacca defense. That's been thrown out there as a possibility. The Twinkie defense, which I'm... what is that one? Is that just... it's familiar. Is that someone ate too many Twinkies and was in diabetic shock or something like that? I don't know. The gay panic defense, I remember that one. Or the I know you are, but what am I defense, which is my own personal favorite. Let's find out. We'll see what they have up their sleeve today. And I think word from Pervalago is that they really kind of hope that it won't be the Bruce Castor show today. But I don't know what the hell else they're going to do. He seems to be the lead counsel in all of this. And I guess David Schoen is available until evening. He says he'll be absenting himself from proceedings tonight and tomorrow, and there will be proceedings tomorrow. At any rate, yes, here is the Washington Post piece, which Armando forwards to me by way of setup. I don't think we have to get through the whole thing, but we'll get the flavor of it. We have to move on. Why Democrats decided to fast-track Trump's second impeachment trial. And that's the major point of contention that Armando has with the trial strategy here, this decision to do this thing quickly. Mike DeBonis, Tom Hamburger, Matt Visor, I don't know what he says. We'll say Visor for that. And Amy Gardner on the byline. The Capitol, they say, was still littered with the wreckage left by the violent mob of Donald Trump supporters when President-elect Joe Biden phoned House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the afternoon of January 8th. Just 48 hours after the deadly attack, Democratic lawmakers, including Pelosi and top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer, they say Charles E. Schumer, had quickly coalesced behind a plan to try to force Trump from office, one that appeared headed toward an unprecedented second impeachment. Biden, less than 2 weeks from taking the oath of office, told Pelosi he did not oppose impeaching Trump and would leave the decision to her, according to two people familiar with the conversation, but he also made clear that he had no intention of letting the prior president's conduct interfere with the early days of his own administration. That message shaped the response now on display a month later. A rapid-fire Senate proceeding is on track to be the quickest presidential impeachment trial in American history, one that suits the political calculations of all the parties, but is highly unlikely to result in Trump's conviction. I don't think there's any surprises there so far. What stands to be lost, at least temporarily, is a full reckoning for what may have been the most dismal day for American democracy since the end of the Civil War. Now, the day, of course, the end of the Civil War was, I guess, a pretty decent day for democracy, but yeah, I think you get what they mean. The days before it were pretty bad. Anyway, all of this, what else would be lost, would include an accounting of Trump's actions inside the White House on January 6th, as the mob rampaged through the Capitol, with some threatening to kill top congressional leaders and Trump's own vice president. Initial interest by House impeachment managers in seeking live testimony for the trial quickly foundered, though they have yet to rule out the possibility entirely. Could still happen, I guess. According to people familiar with their deliberations, who, like others in this report, spoke on, of course, condition of anonymity, Trump rejected a request to testify himself, and calling administration officials or even non-political White House staff could spark messy legal battles that could add weeks to the trial. Many Democrats have concluded that calling witnesses to the violence itself, such as law enforcement officers who battled the mob at the Capitol, could extend the trial indefinitely, with little hope of changing the outcome, given that 44 of 50 Republican senators voted Tuesday to question the constitutionality of the trial. At least 17 would have to join the 50 Democratic senators to convict Trump and set a potential vote on barring him from future office. Biden signaled his own desire to move past the trial on Thursday, telling reporters in the Oval Office that he was paying more attention to pursuing his policy agenda. You know pretty much what he's going to say about that. Key senators from both parties have signaled this week that they see no need for further testimony. For many Republicans, it would only extend what they consider to be a constitutionally invalid proceeding. Of course, it's not. They've reached a decision on that, whose outcome is already known. For many Democrats, the case for conviction is already in plain sight, unlike Trump's first impeachment, which was based on actions that largely took place outside the public eye. Norman Eisen, who served as counsel to the House managers in Trump's first impeachment, said witness testimony is a crucial element in any trial, but the testimony, he said, that testimony need not be live. I know Armando will want to make that point as well and explain why and how that would work. This time, there is a vast amount of incriminating video capturing Trump's comments and the insurrectionists' reactions, Eisen said. Everyone can and will see for themselves what was said by Donald Trump and what subsequently happened. But others, including some Republicans, believe eyewitness testimony could make a difference, and that Democrats are missing an important opportunity to document what they view as Trump's culpability for the riot. Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, one of 10 House Republicans who voted in favor of impeachment, said at a Washington Post Live event Wednesday that White House aides could offer valuable insight on Trump's actions as the riot unfolded. And he argued that senators should hear testimony from those who were amid the riot, such as D.C. police officer Michael Fanoni, who, I don't know whether you pronounce that last E or not, but anyway, he was dragged into the crowd in the Capitol's West Front and heard rioters shout, "Kill him with his own gun." Not a good thing. To hear him tell that story, you realize this is real. This is not a false flag operation, and there was real evil that day, Kinzinger said. A month later, we're sitting here, and some that go, oh, it wasn't so bad. No, this was obviously pretty terrible.
Hey, David, good morning. I know
good
you're
morning.
in the middle of the story,
That's
reading
okay.
that story, which as I sent you as a setup, so
Yes.
I'll let you finish, and then I can react.
Oh, okay. Well, I could do that. Although it is, it's fairly lengthy, I think. But
Yeah, it's the story
might-
that we've discussed for months.
yeah, I mean,
you know,
I
how
think we
you
might
do it.
really know this story already.
Yeah, my first reaction to it, I have read it, obviously, is there was a way to do this.
Yes.
We discussed it at length.
Yes, we did.
I think that ship has sailed, and I'll explain why, though there are other things you can do. But the thing is, they put on their case instead of building it in committee, as we talked about.
Right.
And then, at the end of that committee process, there's a 2-day process, or there was in 2010, where you lay out all your best evidence and in essence, a closing. Mm-hmm. What they did already, except with better evidence.
Right.
So I think they really blew that. It would have served Biden's goals of not detracting from his important agenda, particularly on COVID and everything else. And they didn't take that obvious way of handling this. They could have even framed it that way. We're putting it in committee because we have important things to deal with. Let them get all that, and then we'll get there. They didn't do that.
Yeah.
They did what they did. So here we are. I have 3 issues that I will discuss if you bear with me, hopefully discuss with you, not at you, but I know, unfortunately, sometimes I at instead of with, but I'm going to try to be better. But I would suggest the following 3 things. 1, the actual case that was presented.
Yes.
The pieces that are missing, in my view. And 3, how you can get those pieces now. Where you are now. Not what you should have done. They didn't do what they should have done. I'm on record. I'm not doing all that again. Everyone heard me already. But I do think the 3 of what can be done now is significant. There's a 4, which is somewhat of a looking forward to what Trump's lawyers do today, which you mentioned, and what doors that might open depending on what they do. So with your permission, I would lay out those 4 things. For 1, I'm sure you've discussed with Greg, everybody, I largely agree with everybody that the bulk of the presentation was very well done, very compelling. They used the things that they had available to them. And by the way, look what they had available to them. All that video,
yes,
right?
Right.
How did they get all that video?
Well, it was offered up mostly, I think, probably by accident. The people really had no idea what they were doing. But
that part, yes. But all the insurrection itself, particularly on the grounds and inside the Capitol.
Well, largely, there was a lot of security video.
Yeah, they controlled all that.
Yeah.
They didn't have to subpoena anybody.
Right.
It's theirs. Right?
Yes.
So that's the easy part in a case, the stuff you have.
Yes.
Oh, and let's go back to first principles. This is not a judicial trial. None of this stuff is actually admissible as presented. You don't get to just run a videotape. You actually have to provide foundation, authentication. Nothing. Trump talked about due process in the beginning, but
yes.
They objected to none of the evidence that was put in. The Senate could still reject it in theory and say, well, you know what, this doesn't meet the evidentiary standards, so we're rejecting, which I think would be hilarious if Republicans actually made that argument. I think it'd be fun. But they haven't. So what else did you have? Trump's speech, Trump's tweets, all these things that are in the public record, and they put them all together very well. I thought Raskin was very eloquent in certain points.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't think he's great at drilling down on facts, to be honest with you. I think he's a little high-minded and sometimes doesn't really get to highlight the nitty-gritty of what he has. I think Neguzzi has been a revelation to me. I think the guy was really smart and really puts a story together very well. And I believe that Delegate Stacey Plaskett from the Virgin Islands was given great material, but she did great things with it. I would say those were the 3 highlights. I thought everybody else was largely pedestrian, to be honest with you. I'm not going to plot at all of them. And I think that's one of the weaknesses in these things.
Can at least say serviceable.
Serviceable, fine. I mean, they were bad. They weren't good.
No, there was nothing wrong with their presentation, certainly.
But what happens actually when you have 9 impeachment managers?
Is that what we got?
My view is you feel you're obliged to include everybody.
Yes.
Even if they're not that good or they're not as good as some of the other people you have. I understand the politics of having to do that and
Yes.
sharing time. I think it weakens the presentation, but that's par for the course. So what are you going to do on that? There's nothing else to do. So I think with what they had, what did they prove? They proved Trump's a violent guy. He's always been violent. They proved that Trump basically was the prime mover behind the Stop the Steal rally. His people took it over. They proved that Trump altered the permit, or Trump's people altered the permit so that they could march to the Capitol, which wasn't a part of the original permitting. By the way,
hey, law and order, man.
This is one point on evidence. Who said, okay, let them march to the Capitol?
Yeah.
Who said that
Good
was
question.
okay? Why wasn't that turned
good.
down?
That would be an interesting area of inquiry, either for testimony or, just further investigation. Did somebody call you from the White House Parks and Recreation guy or whoever it is?
Yeah.
Did
someone make an
point.
analysis? Maybe that's not a smart thing to do today. It's a little unsafe.
Yeah.
And were you overruled when that happened? No, the White House wants this, so you got to do it.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
True. And again, here we may have a little bit of leeway in the kind of trial that is for everybody to simply make that assumption, and those who are open to making that assumption will, and the rest will say you didn't prove it, but I was never going to vote for you anyway.
Right,
there's always that in the background.
But David, wouldn't you agree with me that if they had a signed, a videotaped confession of Trump saying, "Yeah, I did it, and I wanted them to attack it," you think they convict him?
Got that? Yeah, I imagine he would deny it, but somewhere along the line they would get somebody.
Suppose he said it was true, because I think you could actually piece together, one line that got some attention, but I would do more is, when they commit fraud, then we play by different rules.
Yes. All right.
What does that mean? What does the different rules mean? Well, it seems to me it means we can get violent, because that's what they did.
Yes.
And it also means
that's what
Mike Pence can act illegally too and throw out the votes.
Yes. I think that's what that means. I'm sure, self-interested parties or Trump-supporting parties will come up with some other explanation. But yeah, certainly. I think they made that point, certainly. But that was you're almost 3/4 of a I ordered the code red moment.
It was. And I again, I didn't watch all of it, so maybe there were parts where it was really hit harder. I didn't. The parts I saw did not really. It got mentioned, it got put up there, but it was sort of just in passing. I think it's one of the key parts of the statement. The other thing that I thought, just as an aside, was Rudy Giuliani's voice message.
Okay.
At 7, they got part of it in there. I want you to stop the count, which I think, goes to a theme that you and I have talked about, but I don't think it was put together quite coherently. And I think the weakness of the case was, what was Trump doing and thinking from 2 to 9? And it's a constant theme I've had on the show.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Rudy said there were a bunch of state legislatures that got very upset about what happened that day.
Mm-hmm.
And what were they? What wasn't hit in the part I saw by Ceciline is, what were the state legislators mad about? Were they mad about the insurrection, the rioting? No, they were mad that they were counting the votes. And so was Trump, and so was Rudy. Yeah. There's just no doubt that the whole point was to stop the count, either by means of Pence, which was Trump's first choice, and the menace that he did. And then he was so angry that when Tuberville, I watched some of yesterday, and I don't think Tuberville's statement was mentioned about, he said that he told Trump that Pence had been evacuated.
Yes.
Because 10 minutes later, Trump tweeted another attack on Pence.
Right. Yeah, I wonder whether he thought he was. Yeah. Well, you could argue about that elsewhere, but it seems pretty obvious that he certainly didn't take that as a sign that it was necessary for him to de-escalate anything. Obviously.
Well, yeah, no, he didn't. So what did they do well? Well, they really organized well, showing the whole history of Trump leading up to 1/6. I thought that part, up to the day, was very effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think the coverage of the emoting, as Turley would say, but I think that's smart lawyering and smart political lawyering, because this is a political trial. It's not a legal trial. And since we know there's not going to be a conviction, at least I know, I'm pretty sure you know, I'm pretty sure they know, you were never going to get 67. That was affected. The true danger, Plaskett outlining how, frankly, Mitt Romney would have, I believe, gotten killed myself, but at the very least seriously harmed by the mob, unless Goodman told him you're going the wrong way and then delayed the mob while he got to safety. And apparently that, there was a similar sequence with Pence. I thought that part was stunningly good. It was well done, really well done. And it was the moment where Republicans really were looking at their shoes, except for Rand Paul, who's a shameless scumbag. So even I think Ted Cruz sort of was looking at his shoes a little bit. But Rand Paul, of course, In fact, I think he was tweeting some nonsense right during that presentation about how, Raskin objected to the electors in 2009, which I actually didn't remember. And, we've discussed the flaws in the Electoral Count Act.
Yeah,
Section 15, which really needs to be amended and end this nonsense. They should never do that again. But be that as it may, Raskin didn't have a mob.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the
outside.
easiest answer is possible. I might. Well, he objected. All right, show me a single murder from that. How many
Show
fingers?
Me a single mob that I have that I get.
Right. Yeah, at all. And it was
much
not
less
even
killing anybody. I mean, I didn't have a mob.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. I mean, we'll talk. Here we are. We'll bring in some live testimony here. I'm going to ask questions here, since we'll make more parallels to A Few Good Men here. I have the rental agents at the fencing company, and I'm going to ask them how many emergency storm fences and what length of emergency unscalable fencing did we rent that day? And the answer is none. There's no entry in the log on that.
Right.
And they'll testify.
Right. The plane seat. Exactly. So, evidence matters, David. It just does.
Yeah,
and,
I know what you mean. Sure.
And everyone says, well, they made the case. Yeah, I know they made the case. But you want the case to be even better when it can be. All right, so we've talked about before 1/6, we've talked about through the violence and the true danger that was happening. I thought that was incredibly well presented. What didn't work for me? The thing that has never worked for me. How were you going to prove what Trump was doing from 2 to 9? They didn't even use the evidence they had well, in my view. And frankly, this goes to the point of having to use a lot of House managers. I know Dave Cicilline probably thinks he's a great litigator. But he wasn't great. He wasn't even good, in my opinion.
Oh, no? All right. I thought he did okay, but okay.
All right. Well, everybody has their point of view. Did you get the feeling
but I didn't have
that
any
he laid it
expectation.
Out? I did not get the feeling that he laid out that the Pence situation, the calls, he did not tie that, in my head, well, at least the part of the presentation I saw, to the fact that there was a riot going on and the President of the United States wasn't doing anything to stop it. I don't mean going on and saying go home and tweet. I mean as the commander-in-chief ordering out the National Guard to go beat some heads, as he would have done. Well, what's his thing? When the looting, I think that was you. So when the looting starts, the shooting starts?
Yes, right. None of that seemed to happen. You also, I noticed, mentioned at some point, how long did it take him to clear Lafayette Square Park when he wanted to have a photo op?
Exactly. When he wanted action, he knew how to do it. I did not. I know they just sort of said the words. True. I just didn't think that part of the presentation was as effective. And it could be because you don't have the evidence. Right? So Cicilline doesn't have the evidence, so he doesn't get to do it as well as Plaskett got to do her part because she had the video.
Although, again, if his presentation is on the absence of evidence, well, what evidence is completely absent here? There was no effort to sweep through the area and tear gas everybody out of out of the square. Here's, you know what? I'll play you the video of Lafayette Square Park. Here's what didn't happen at the Capitol when Trump, if you hear later on from the defense, oh yes, he absolutely wanted this to stop.
I wonder if they will. That's a huge question. I wonder if they're going to make a fact issue there.
We'll see about that. But yeah, they certainly could have proven it. I would add one other thing to the point about the vice president, and I don't know whether the managers were aware of what they were looking at yet, because it looks to me like the reporters who have reported it spent some time unsure of it. But Slate, I think, I guess so. Now I'm wondering, do they still exist? Slate, do I have that right?
Yes, they do. They do.
Okay, it's definitely them. Okay. So one Slate reporter here, Fred Kaplan, has written something that I got a question about yesterday after the show, and I wasn't sure where it came from, but this may be it. The question in the headline of the piece: how close did Capitol rioters get to the nuclear football? Because apparently, sharp-eyed viewers of the video of Pence making his escape from the shelter note that there is an aide carrying what does appear to be the backup nuclear football. That may have been a point they wanted to make during the trial at some point, that rioters not only came close to finding Mitt Romney, not only came close to possibly seizing the vice president and taking him to the gallows outside, but may have had their hands on a nuclear football had things gone wrong. Now, the technicalities of whether or not they really could have done anything with it are, the answer is no. But I think that probably would have shocked some senators out of their seats if they had really given that some thought. We got to take our break, but we can react that, oh my God, that for the next 2 minutes off the air, and then come back and replay it for you after this.
Well, I just think, again, that goes to getting evidence.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando's still with us. We left off with Fred Kaplan's story. I'm just making mention of him. Perhaps we'll comb through it later, but making the point that it certainly appears from the video that's provided and the still shot that he's taken from it and the research that Kaplan's done with vice presidential staffers, former vice presidential staffers mostly, as I recall, that is in all likelihood, in fact, a picture of one of the backup nuclear footballs traveling with the vice president, and uniquely positioned in a situation like this, I think, as opposed to trying a case in the courtroom, to be able to really sensationalize this to some extent and say, look, this is a holy crap moment. There's going to be a lot of people that are like, oh my God, rioters getting their hands on a nuclear football. Again, at bottom, they could not have launched a nuclear attack with the thing. It wouldn't have worked. But that's probably enough. And as you mentioned, as we discussed this during the break, if you're explaining, and especially if you're explaining, well, technically, the QAnon shaman with the headdress on and the face paint wouldn't have been able, probably, I think, anyway, to launch a nuclear attack and end all life on Earth. Technically speaking, okay,
sure,
fine. You want to make that your case?
Our own
go
nuclear
for it.
footballs. We can't do anything with them anyway.
Why guard them? What do you need an Air Force guy for? He should be out flying planes. Let Pence carry it himself. And if he leaves it on the metro, so be it.
No big, no biggie.
No, that would have been, I think that may have been a missed opportunity, but it may also have been, I mean, Fred Kaplan discusses in his piece about how someone brings it to his attention and he says, no, that's not what it is. And they don't even have one, do they? And then it took him a day or two to develop the story to the point where he was comfortable saying, yeah, I guess that is. So certainly the managers could have had the same problem. Although, again, you'd think, don't we have access as members of Congress to somebody who could tell us that? But maybe they didn't spot it. I don't know. But a longer trial would give us a chance to ask about that.
A longer process. I mean, again,
yes,
what we're calling the trial, of course, is what people are seeing now in the full Senate. And,
correct.
Since we've discussed it, the Senate impeachment committee process, just to take the last one, that happened in 2010. They convened an impeachment committee to try Judge Thomas Porteous. Yes. And there was discovery, and there were subpoenas, and there was then the taking of evidence before the committee and over a 5-day trial where there were a lot of witnesses, et cetera, and it was mundane corruption stuff. Okay. But they took the time to gather the evidence and to really do it. This actually mattered a lot more than one corrupt judge. And they didn't do that. And I understand it. That's why I wanted you to set up with the WAPO piece about, we got things to do. Okay, you know what? Yeah. I get that. I really do. You've got things to do, got important things to do. Biden's cabinet and COVID relief and this and that. And Congress has a lot to do. But, that's why you invented the impeachment committee process.
Yes. I mean, literally is. They said, we have an awful lot to do. We can't stop the Senate for impeaching a single judge.
Well, we don't have to stop it for impeaching a single former president either. The removal from office, as we've been told, is no longer part of the equation. Ergo, what's the rush of having it be before the full Senate? All right, that's water under the bridge. They screwed that up. That's a strategic blunder that will haunt them. And I think it will haunt them in a way that they don't realize. Because suppose they do the 1-6 commission they're talking about, Pelosi's talked about, and all this stuff comes out. Yeah. What do Republicans get to say? Well, if I had known that, if you had presented me that, of course I would have disqualified him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could. Well, I don't know why I'm going to bother arguing with it. Yeah, they would do that. Yes. If
the politics is right at the time, what I'm saying is it's an easy escape hatch. Suppose Trump does something so horrible they have to disavow it, and you wanted to hang them with acquitting Trump. You can't, because you didn't. You're going to find out stuff, and you will. And I'm sure there'll be at least some committee that gets a lot of these things, and it'll come out. And I'm telling you, the question's going to be, why didn't you ask for that during the impeachment trial?
Yeah.
And I think it's a fair question. Why didn't you? If this was a trial that started on January 16th, you have no time for all that stuff. So you do this case as well as you can, because you need him removed immediately. We'll do this case in one day, and you guys can vote him out right now. Yeah. Right. So when they impeached on 113,
that might have been
which frankly they maybe could have done it sooner. And if McConnell had come back, and he said, okay, well, we got one day to do an impeachment trial. That's fine. Let's do it. Think of it as a TRO, or preliminary injunction. You do the best you can under the circumstances. Lawyers do that all the time, and you do what you do. But we didn't do that, and he's out of office. So, they could have done it differently. So what now? To me, let's go back to my 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 2. I've said all the great things they've done. I was telling you where I think the holes are, and I think a lot of them. You talk about this nuclear football thing, which I didn't even know about.
Right. Which,
I mean,
lots of people probably didn't. I didn't till somebody asked about it, and then they sent me this article after that.
All right. So what do we have? We don't have that. So can we get what do we do now? Can you get the people in the White House who know that Trump was like sitting on his hands and excited? And why aren't you guys excited about this? This is great.
Yeah.
All right, so you put in the tweets he sent and the other things, and you're very special. This is what happens when you steal an election stuff. All all good. They put that in. But what is missing? I'll go again to my point. He was the president of the United States at the time with the duty to protect the United States. In D.C., there's no governor who can call out the National Guard. Only the president through his designees can do that, right? In this case, it's the Secretary of Defense, I believe, by some rule. All right, so what can you do?
Certainly appears that way, yeah.
There are people who were not in the White House who were involved in the mobilization of the National Guard. Those people have no privileges, no basis for refusing testimony. Ask them what happened, who you had to talk to. Did you get any contact from the White House? What was said?
Yeah.
Did the president get on the horn and say, get somebody out there right now? We know he did. My point is that's evidence.
Yeah.
And you can still get that now. How do you do it? You identify. Look, the reporters have done some decent work, and they've identified who you want to get. There's 10, 15 people.
Some of that is on the record. They could have presented it that way since they relied on news reports, but
that's also true. They sort of half-assed the 2 to 9 period. I mean, that's really the truth.
And I don't know whether they're depending on the defense today to be about, to establish some different timeline and claim that the president was doing all that he could and they can rebut it? Or, why would you depend on that?
They do. That's our best hope. They put in a false timeline that then needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think you would say
it would
don't
be
wait for that possibility.
For Trump's lawyers to get into that.
It might be, and if you had good, solid evidence, you wouldn't say, well, why don't we roll the dice on what the defense is going to do to help us determine, whether or not to present some of the key evidence. Nah, you ought to present it. If you get a chance to present it again and reframe it in rebuttal, fine, but don't sit on it hoping.
Well, let's be clear. As it stands now, pursuant to the Senate impeachment resolution, there is no rebuttal period.
Okay, well then
the setup of this impeachment resolution is ridiculous. Okay, the 16 hours have now, they gave back 4 hours or whatever. So there is now the 16 hours for the Trump defense, which by all accounts they're not planning on using much of it. My belief is that since Schoen has to leave at 5:30 because of sundown,
yes,
they're planning on doing it in 4 hours.
I guess.
No one else is talking. I would do as little as possible. I'd give a little Fox fodder. Apparently, they're going to do some whataboutism, which is good for Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what so and so said, and look at what's they're going to run stupid tapes like that.
Yes, right. I know.
I actually don't think that's effective, but for Fox, they'll use it and they'll run with it fine.
Right, they're very into that.
I assume they'll go back to their legal defenses. I wouldn't be surprised that they re-argue jurisdiction, which I think they will. I would if I were them. There's no rule that says I can't.
Right. Yeah. No. That's one of the differences with the court.
The House,
proceeding.
I object. They say that's irrelevant. That issue has already been presented.
Yeah. It might not be a bad idea to object to that. Somebody who is finally entitled to make an objection should object instead of Mike Lee, who should have been gavelled out of order immediately.
Exactly. That's right. And of course, Raskin probably did the right thing, just said, listen, I don't need it. Because I actually did see another part where Cicilline basically says the same thing, but doesn't attribute it to Mike Lee. So it's in the record.
He does the right thing. There's no point in irritating Lee or any of his friends. It's been read into the record.
It's a sideshow.
There's no rule by which they can exclude it from the record. That's what Lee was looking for, but he didn't get that. I'm sure they said, well, we'll withdraw the use of it. But, it's been said and everybody heard it. That's all.
Yeah.
And everybody read the article. Everybody knows Lee said that.
Right. So what else can you expect from them? I would think they'd re-hit the First Amendment nonsense.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And then I think they're just going to say the president had no idea that violence would erupt. It came as a shock to him.
The violence lover had no idea.
I understand. I'm just saying that you can do because then
my own commentary. Yeah.
The evidence is what it is. You either believe it or you don't, but it doesn't open up new cans of worms.
Mm-hmm.
What they should not do, in my view, is touch the 2 to 9 period at all.
The defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't.
Right. Sure. I
don't want to put that in play.
I dare them to do it. Maybe that'll work.
I wish they would. I mean, I think that's the only way we can get the House managers to actually feel like they have to do something. And maybe they hope that they take it up. And I wouldn't if I were.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll put it that way. I mean, and think about it. I mean, Bruce Castor.
Yes.
Is bad. He's a bad lawyer.
Yes.
The other guy's, shouty and a pain in the butt, but at least he's not completely incompetent. I think they have some other guy, Vanderveen or somebody that's going to talk today.
I haven't heard from him, but yeah.
I think he's supposedly going to do the First Amendment part, though Schoen sort of did it already. I don't even know. I do think Schoen has to drop his due process stuff, because if he wants due process, confronting witnesses and everything, he can call them. And they don't want that. So I think they just keep it simple. Whataboutism, jurisdiction, First Amendment, this is a sham and a farce, of a travesty of a farce. And,
right. Call himself as a witness.
Right. And, be a little shouty about this or the other. Say, okay, it's time for a break. And hopefully the break's like 25, 30 minutes. And basically turn your little 3-4 hour presentation to 2 actual hours of talking. Mm-hmm. And then rest.
Yes. Okay.
That's
we'll
what
see
I would do if I were them.
Now, who's the lead counsel? Is it?
I believe Schoen will almost certainly be the lead, but Jason Miller says Bruce Castor is going to be redeemed today.
Yes. I guess I'm wondering whether there's a designated lead and whether it's Castor. And
Castor is the lead.
Whether that means if Castor's just a insane egotist, like what happens if, Schoen leaves for the day and then Castor says, I'm going to do like 6 hours.
Would that be funny? I mean, okay, now he's gone. It's my turn.
Right. He can't stop me. He can't even, suggest that it's a bad idea at this point. I guess the other guy, Vanderveen, well, what about me? When's my turn? Well, we got 16 hours. He only used 2. There's 14 to go. Today and tomorrow. Yeah. Right. I mean, I guess they could. And Schoen can't even pick up the phone and say, no, don't. So, all right, fine. I wonder. I can't believe that they would talk themselves out of it. What are they even doing there? And Vanderveen's got to be like, I'd come all the way here to just sit at this table, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way some of the house managers probably should have worked. We didn't even come all the way here. I walked here. So if I sit at a table and I'm supporting staff, that's fine for me. But no, they wanted to talk. So
so I'm just looking at a tweet from this morning. This is Caitlin Collins said, and this is what I was referring to before. Jason Miller makes clear on Newsmax that Bruce Castor will have a speaking role today. His arguments will be crisper and tighter.
Okay.
He adds that the defense team reviewed their plan with Trump last night. They will go about 4 hours, which makes sense because the reality is Castor will have very little speaking role, I assume, and it has to end by the time Schoen has to go leave because it's sundown. And of course, if you don't know, he's an Orthodox Jew, and he can't work from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday.
And he asked about that ahead of time, and they arranged it for him. He withdrew his request, but I don't think they changed the schedule. So it may be that, at 5:30, there isn't an opportunity for Castor to just go on, but he might be able to do that all day tomorrow.
Okay, so the new twist on this, though, is per the Senate impeachment resolution, after the presentations in chief of the parties, the House and the Trump defense, what comes next is Senator question time for 4 hours, right? And Manu Raju, responding to Caitlin Collins, says GOP senators roundly panned Castor last time, and now the Trump team is making adjustments. After Trump team is done arguing, the Senate may speed up its schedule and move to Senator question and answer tonight. So how does that work? So let's say he's done it 4.
Where are you getting this, though? Who's commenting? And
that's Manu Raju,
okay.
the CNN's congressional reporter.
Okay.
And so Q&A, as you recall, it's silly nonsense, generally speaking. But there are some pointed questions you can do to Trump if you want, if you're a Democratic senator. Which, given these two lawyers, in fact, I direct all my questions to Attorney Castor.
Well, you have to if Schoen's not there anyway.
That's right. Oh my God.
So I guess Van der Veen might be able to. I don't know. But why would you direct the question to Van der Veen if you haven't heard a word from him? It might be just only.
If he's the guy, apparently he's going to argue the First Amendment point. So I don't have a question about your silly First Amendment stuff.
Yeah.
So I think Castor is. I think it's interesting now that I think about it. But the problem is, Schoen isn't available on Saturday either.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, if questions begin tomorrow, I was thinking maybe Schoen has the ability to make sure that Castor doesn't just go on either tonight or tomorrow by wrapping up his presentation and then 5:30 saying the defense rests and run out of the room, and Castor could say, "Wait, no, we don't."
I mean, that's what
you did.
Do,
you rested,
but it doesn't help on the Senate question. If they move the Senate question time up to tonight,
then that starts tomorrow, or I guess it could
start
tonight.
You could do, let's say they end at 4, they take an early dinner, they start questions at 7 or something like that.
They could, right? I think if they rest and they just say, all right, that's the next phase according to the orders, then and then Schoen's gone and just, all right, questions to whoever you want, I suppose, but on the defense side, again, I can't imagine, unless there's a prior relationship between the senators and Van der Veen, why would you bother directing your questions to him?
Well, they don't.
They must have. They could have set it up that way.
I don't think so. I think Van der Veen's just some. I'm sure he's good at what he does, but what he does is personal injury and stuff like that.
He sued Trump in the past.
And listen, that's a real skill. I don't mean to denigrate it. Right. It's just not this.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with their question time then. But they might just. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
I mean, that's a real roll of the dice from Trump to let Bruce Castor
handle the
questions. Answer the questions.
I guess so, unless he just figures the questions are stupid anyway, whatever. But I mean, you don't know where the guy could go. He was so rambling.
That's why I pointed, and they can't save it by waiting till Saturday either, because Castor in theory can't come back until sundown on Saturdays. I understand the religious observance here. I mean,
Saturday night,
I mean, that's the whole idea of it, as I recall.
Yep.
So what happens? Castor has to answer. So what? You get it done late Friday night news dump and let him just screw up? That's a heck of a roll of the dice. It's an interesting strategic play. But that's actually a point where Democrats can, if they want, raise the 2 to 9 issues by asking, did President Trump order the code red? No. I mean, they could ask,
right.
But did he actually seek to activate the National Guard?
Yeah. I still have my questions about, and I think perhaps going to the question of whether or not the president or Trump directed the attack, in case there's still any doubt about that. I would love to have questions about. So when the Secret Service, we see here at 2 o'clock, before 3 o'clock, somewhere between 2 and 3 o'clock, I forget the exact time, the Secret Service is evacuating the vice president. And why does the Secret Service evacuate one of their protectees? Because there's a threat to their life. So I guess the next question is, how is it that you claim that this word doesn't get to the president, even though Tommy Tuberville says, oh, I told them that they were doing that. Plus, we now see it. There's no way in the world, I think as maybe it was one of the old Obama advisors was tweeting the other day, there's no way that the Secret Service mobilizes to evacuate a vice president and that doesn't reach the president.
Well, now we know reach the president via Tommy Tuberville.
Yes, right. We know that anyway, but there's also no way to plausibly claim that it doesn't get there in a second independent channel through the Secret Service. That's something they would absolutely have told the rest of the Secret Service protective details and then passed on to the president. But I guess more to the point, why there's no evidence at the White House of any additional security measures whatsoever, even though there is an uncontrollable riot that has overwhelmed the defenses of the legislative branch of government 2 miles down the road. And a crowd at the hands of a crowd that originated at the White House, obviously, which, is sort of circumstantial evidence about it, but more circumstantial evidence that the president was in no doubt about his safety, despite the fact that there was a violent insurrection against the United States government underway. And the only way he could come to that conclusion is, well, who's the safest person in the middle of a serial murder spree? The serial murderer, because he's not going to kill himself. But there's no protection necessary for him. This, but that's, I think, a serious question is why there is not even the most mild additional security measures. We all know, I'd love to establish the timeline that the president is sitting on his hands or watching gleefully on TV and that he's tweeting these things. But why is the president in the middle of a violent insurrection against the United States government free to do any of these things instead of being in the bunker where he was when there was a Black Lives Matter protest outside? And the answer is because he's the general in charge of the insurrection. He's not going to tell him, turn around and kill me, so I get to watch TV. And I think they should talk about that. And that should be part of the discussion. And I mean, when I went looking, the best evidence I was able to dig up of all that was, I went to the White House pool reports. Actually, from that day. They have those, someone has assigned from the White House Correspondents Association for that day, just to hang around in case of the announcement of any stupid news. There's a security role involved in there. The president had a heart attack, or I saw him evacuated, or just dumb stuff. They've made nominations to the Smithsonian Board of Regents, and I picked up the press release, and here it is for everybody in the press. It's a service to the rest of the press, and they post their dispatches. And there's a post from 3:00 from one of the White House, it's one of the Washington Post reporters. Nothing, no unusual activity here at the White House. Notes, obviously things are different at the Capitol, but nothing to report here. Nothing, the president hasn't been moved, there's no additional guards, there's no
just a normal
police.
Day, the president watching TV and tweeting over here.
Right. And I mean, that is, I think, evidence. Easy enough to, I found it. I went to the White House pool reports and just looked, scrolled back until I found the thing. And I don't know, you want a live witness? Bring the reporter who was on duty that day. What unusual activity, if any, did you witness around the White House? None. In fact, my report says, it's weird that nothing is happening in a sense, because I see what's happening at the Capitol. You all are locked in rooms fearing for your life, but nothing happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, when we talk about the presentation on 2 to 9, did you see that?
Yeah.
I didn't see it from their presentation, that press report, that there was no unusual activity at the White House, and despite the fact that the Congress was overrun by rioters. Yep. The president didn't give it a second thought. Yes, he did, of course. Yeah. It was his thought, and he was enjoying it. He was enjoying his handiwork. We know that. But you go with what you got if you're not going to call witnesses. So anyway, I do think there's opportunities to buttress 2 to 9 in that senator question time. But again, based on the WAPO article, it would not surprise me if the Democratic senators don't ask a single question.
Yes.
And neither do the Republicans, and they say, well, no questions, we're done.
Yep.
And then what happens on Saturday? Well, I believe, though I think the resolution itself is somewhat murky, the next step is, well, does anybody want witnesses? I guess they could ask tonight. And everybody says, nope, no witnesses. Me either. All right, closings. Closings.
Yep. All
right. I'm done. I'm good. Trump's lawyers, I'm good too. All right, well, tomorrow the Senate will debate, and then we'll vote. And it's done Saturday.
Yeah, I guess it could be. I mean, I think they were anticipating stretching it out to the vote until next week, but and they may yet do that. You can have the closings and then vote on Monday.
On, as the WAPO story says. We got to move on.
Yes.
I tell you, this is the thing, and I think that there's going to be a real bad taste in Democrat base mouths if no one on the Democratic side or the House side, be it the Senate with their questions or the House managers, have anything else to say. If this is it, I bet you there's not going to say, wait, that's it? Where are the witnesses? There's going to be a million people who haven't been paying attention and think, well, there'll be witnesses at some point, won't there? Or we're going to ask for witnesses at least, and we control the Senate. Why are we having witnesses? And it's going to be like, what?
Yeah, I think there'll be some additional twists on the whataboutism that'll come about today. Is that they'll bring out the comments from Democrats during the first impeachment that hey, it's not a trial if you don't have witnesses.
Yes, and I think it's fair.
This
to
time
be honest
you
with
have
you.
run the trial and you still didn't ask for any witnesses. So at the very least, we're off the hook for the first one, or you're on the hook for blowing it in the second one. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays. I think there could be a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouths. I think there'll be an effort to say, well, we're going to have this commission, and there's still criminal charges that could be brought. But if you got them on the hot seat now, you really should make the most of it. Even though I know they say, well, there's not going to be a conviction, and we all know it. But or save keep your powder dry for the criminal charges later on. But yeah, I don't know. I don't hold out much hope. I know how these investigative committee things go. The committees will be more or less, they'll be evenly divided. You'll have Jim Jordan screaming about things, and it'll just turn into a big mess. They'll file a report.
This is the best forum for these things, and it's just absurd. No. But anyway, we can talk about more on the other side. All
right. Easy enough to do. We can stretch our proceedings out. That option is available to us. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue. This is really only one topic you could be talking about today, even though we also know that things will come to a foregone conclusion. But this is the big news of the day. There are some other things, of course, that are out there, and we'll get a chance to share some of those in the last segment. But while we have Armando still here, I guess this is a good segue point too, right? I mean, the Washington Post article was all about got to move on, and we know sort of what needs to be moved on to. It would be nice to end the pandemic. It would be nice to relieve people of the suffering, economic and otherwise, that they've had during the pandemic. And some of those things will happen, but it's not at all immediately clear that if the trial wasn't here, or we could end it in a minute, what exactly would we be doing on the Senate floor just now anyway? I'm sure, there's always lots of appointments to be approved, but...
Well, it's 10 o'clock, and this is a question I was going to ask you. One thing Schumer did at the end of yesterday's segment was, by unanimous consent, say the Senate can reengage in legislative business and committees can refer and do certain things. Right. So I am assuming there's something he had in mind that he wanted to have moved that evening. I guess that starts the clock on something, which allows him to do something.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
God knows what. So I would assume most of that would be nominations. I know near attendance confirmation hearings in both committees were over. So I don't know if they're voting this morning or on her or not. So that, tees up a vote on her nomination to OMB. I'm sure there's other nominees. Oh, by the way, the one nominee who hasn't been moved is one Merrick Garland. One would have thought the Attorney General's nomination would have been something to move, but Dick Durbin goes at Dick Durbin's pace. I'm less impressed with him every day, to be honest with you, but that's me. So there's probably something you might not have noticed, but yesterday I saw that the House Ways and Means Committee passed the COVID relief bill in committee by party line vote. So whatever that value has in terms of the House's process. That's happening. The House is moving things.
Yes.
I don't know what the Senate would move. I guess the Budget Committee probably has to do something. I leave that to people who know about that stuff.
Right.
All right, but there's still other ways of actually getting the Senate back to regular business. I still think you could convene an impeachment committee, but
nothing
it's sort of backwards now. They've already sort of put on their case to the full Senate. That comes after the committee is how it should have done. But they still can do something with, and it's part of the Senate impeachment resolution, where you can, what happens after Senator questions is hypothesize that they do Senate questions today or tonight. Then tomorrow, the president says, any new business, managers, anything to say? And Raskin get up. Yes, the managers have made a motion seeking the permission to seek testimony from A, B, C, D, and E. Mm-hmm. We propose that testimony be taken. Well, it's actually in the rules because you're supposed to do a deposition in there. So, and pursuant to Senate impeachment rule resolution section X, Y, or Z, we propose to depose so-and-so by videotape deposition on Monday, so-and-so on Tuesday, so-and-so on Wednesday, or all three of them on Monday and two of them on Tuesday, whatever you want to do. And that after that's done, we reconvene to present that evidence to the full body on Thursday or whatever day.
Yeah, that option is still available to them. I happen to have gotten a note yesterday from someone asking about that as well. Is there anything that precludes them from deciding at this point either to handle some of the witness testimony outside of the setting of the Senate floor, or even to convene a committee at this point? It would be unusual, but the whole thing is unusual.
The committee would be unusual at this point.
Yeah, there's nothing standing in the way, and nothing I saw in the Senate rules, nothing I saw in the orders that says no to it, but it's pretty clear that, the assumption is, well, if you were going to use a committee at some point, that you would lay that out at the start. They might not necessarily have to conduct the entirety of the trial in committee. You could sort of bifurcate things and say, these statements will be made on the floor, then we'll move to committee, and then closing statements, of some other kind will be made afterwards. But they didn't lay that out, and you would think they'd want to know that from the beginning. My assumption is no, there's no effort to move to convene a committee at this point.
That's not happening. But
certainly the possibility
what you do have precedent for now, though, David, is what happened in the Clinton Senate impeachment trial, which Lindsey Graham might be familiar with. They asked for testimony from certain witnesses. I don't recall them off the top of my head, but I do believe it even included Monica Lewinsky and I think Betty Curry as well, and a few others, where they asked for and were granted permission by the then Republican-controlled Senate to take these witnesses and testimony by videotape deposition, which they did, and then they played parts of those depositions to the full Senate. Mm-hmm. They take a break from the trial for, I believe, a week, and then came back and played some more of this stuff, and then there were closings and there were votings, and it was over. But the precedent is there if you want to do it. And guess what? During that 1 week, the Senate was doing regular business while these videotape depositions were going on.
So there is that. And if you want to get back to business, that's one way to do it. Even if you think you're not done collecting evidence. So if they don't collect any more evidence, that means the conclusion was they didn't feel like they needed it, or it wasn't advantageous to them. It wasn't because they were precluded by the rules.
Well, that's advantageous in what sense? In the political Biden agenda sense? Because I think clearly more evidence is better for your case, even the political case against Trump. But I think that, look, I mean, back to the beginning of the show, the WAPO article tells you where all the Democrats are at. And I'm not sure if Raskin would, if he had his druthers, he probably would love to do it. But he's a soldier, and he's got to follow orders from Pelosi and Schumer, and ultimately Biden. And I'm sure Biden said, "You guys do what you want, but just remember, I got to move my agenda." He's still the president. If he tells you, "Look, I need to move my agenda," that's going to register. But I think it's their own calculus in many ways.
Yes,
so
and they have their own.
So this is there. They could say we need a week, but here's the problem: who can I get in a week? Because if I try to get Mark Meadows, for example, he's going to object and go to court and say I don't need to testify, and so you're not going to get him in a week. But there are people you can get in that week, and I've tried to outline them before. The people who are on that call about calling up the National Guard.
Yeah, probably some of those you can get, and maybe it's not such a bad thing. You can't get Mark Meadows in a week, and you go back and you say, well, here's what we got, and guess what we didn't get, and see if you can figure out in your own minds why we couldn't get agreement from a former high-ranking official who should feel personal responsibility to testify at this proceeding, but decides not to.
Well, even better, Mark Meadows in particular apparently went on Fox News and said, and on the air testified that, the president was really engaged in trying to get things moving to defend the Capitol.
That he had time.
So to the degree that he had an executive privilege claim, it seems waived to me. But and second of all, as I've always said, it's Biden's privilege at this point. It doesn't belong to Trump.
Right.
As his lawyers have told us, he's a private citizen. Private citizens do not have executive privilege claims. It is up to the president to assert it. And generally presidents do it for former presidents.
Yeah.
That is the norm, but nothing says Biden has to.
Yeah, right. That's true.
And that's actually become a bigger issue, I suspect, when they have this 1-6 commission, which I think they will have. And Meadows is going to want it, and Biden's going to say, nope, this is too important. We need to know what happened. Mm-hmm. I waive executive privilege for everybody on any conversations that happened on 1-6, because you can do a 1-day waiver, right?
I don't know. Sure, well, I guess you could do anything you want if it's your privilege.
Yeah, you could waive it all, but let's be realistic and politically be politic about it, which is what day does everyone want to hear about? Well, they want to hear about January 6th.
All right, they'll waive it for
They want to hear about what Trump was doing from 2 to 9. My arguments are circular because that's always been the problem with the evidence in the case. We don't know what happened from 2 to 9, except for those bits where Rudy called the wrong number and Trump called the wrong number, and the tweeting. But other than that, what do we know?
About what he did that day? Yeah, not too much. Right? You might have to prove it by negative inference, but I've got your source for that.
That's the argument that Raskin sort of made, and it's certainly permissible. It isn't some crazy Fifth Amendment violation. It just isn't.
No, everyone understands
this is not a criminal trial.
Well, it's
there is an adverse inference jury instruction in civil cases all the freaking time.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I guess because it sounds like technical jargon, they didn't understand it. But again, there I rely on popular culture and the movies, and in particular, again, a Few Good Men. If the public is having trouble understanding it because somebody makes a big deal, well, I don't know what all. I'm not a fancy lawyer. What all this negative inference stuff. In my day, you just prove things by proving it. No. Here's what it is. You understand. You remember the scene from the courtroom drama scene in A Few Good Men where Caffey has the Colonel Jessup on the stand, and he says to him, they go through the whole thing. The court doesn't understand it at the beginning either. I understand your befuddlement, but he asks him about who did you call when you had to come to Washington? What did you pack? And, but that one crucial moment where they say, Santiago was leaving for the rest of his life, and he didn't call anyone, and he hadn't packed a thing. Can you explain that? This is what's happening here. Over at the White House press pool says nobody moved anything, and they didn't protect a thing.
Right?
Can you explain that?
That's
negative
Tom
inference.
Cruise's performance in A Few Good Men on that issue would have been nice if somebody had sort of tried to do it. To me, the parts I saw, that type of argument hasn't been made well.
Yeah,
that's to me the flaw in the presentation. And again, a lot of it's not having evidence, but they could have done a Tom Cruise thing. You're right. Where was the president? How come we didn't hear about all his orders of get those guys out there and get them going and let's go?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I don't think that was, in essence, you're right. It's a great Few Good Men reference that Santiago didn't pack, and there was no plane log, and all these things that you're saying is what you could do when you don't have the ability to get the evidence. And it's interesting now that I'm remembering the story. It was hard for Cruz to get evidence because military guys, apparently you can't say anything bad about somebody because that breaks the rules too, or something. I forget that crazy part of the military code.
Oh, perhaps
if you disparage a fellow officer, even if under oath, you're in trouble.
I guess. I don't know. That part doesn't jump out at me either. But yeah, there were all sorts of problems, including the fact that I guess the Air Force guys that they were going to call were going to testify, actually going to testify to something that was damaging to their case, but they didn't end up needing to call them. But I'm just saying, I do think it would be valuable to set up that question of why is there no evidence of the president doing anything, and why is there no evidence of the people for whom there are strict protocols, protection protocols? Why did they waive all their protocols as well? But I just, in referring to A Few Good Men thing, in addition to explaining what you're going after here, is if you are attacked on the grounds of, I don't know about this whole, you can't infer a negative, don't you know? You can't prove a negative, which is conflating two different things. But doing so for effect, saying, I'm not a fancy lawyer like these guys, but I know you can't prove a negative. No, you misunderstand. Not only is that not what a negative inference is, but I will show you how well you understand what a negative inference actually is and how you know it, but not by name. You all remember the courtroom scene, and and you go run through that and say, did that make sense to you? Did you think that was the gotcha moment? Why does Colonel Jessup explode at that moment? And the answer is because he knows he's been caught dead to rights. Do you think so? You all understood that, right? That scene made sense to you? Yes. That's drawing a negative inference. If you thought that scene made sense, then you think drawing a negative inference makes sense. You just didn't know what the technical term for it. What that guy is doing is, what that guy just said is bullcrap. Right? It's a different courtroom movie. But if that scene made sense,
negative inference, and just to be lawyerly, what Raskin was doing is again, it's sort of a jury instructor. You can take an adverse inference because Trump didn't testify when invited. I mean, they're not generally done in that scenario, but it is. There are adverse inferences that you can take based on certain things that don't happen.
In addition to which, I guess here also, I mean, when it comes to Trump not testifying, and that in fact was the negative inference that they were arguing about. I'm making a different negative inference about why there's no evidence of his having done anything to stop the riot. But in terms of the negative inference of Trump not testifying, I think there you also have something you could enter into evidence, which is all of Trump's prior statements on the record about what it means when someone pleads the fifth. That he's constantly said, when somebody because he's usually talking about somebody else, and pointing out their flaws when they're in trouble and with the courts. When somebody takes the Fifth Amendment, that's because they know they're guilty. And that's why he's not testifying. And, that's not the inference you're supposed to make. And if you're a juror in a real courtroom, they'll say, no, that's not what you're supposed to. You're not supposed to infer guilt from it, but you certainly can infer motive of some kind. And it's up to you what kind it is when they decline to testify at all.
All right, I think it would have been more pointed to me, all the inferences we're talking about, if it had been framed in, show us what the White House did to respond to the rioting. I won't even use insurrection. The rioting that was going on at the White House. What did you do? Because you, Mr. President, had control of the had at the time when you were president, control of the National Guard.
Yeah.
In D.C.
Right.
This isn't the state of Pennsylvania or wherever where the governor calls up the Guard. You specifically had the power to respond to this. What
Not only
did you
have the
do?
power, but we saw you exercise it.
Yes, and we've actually seen you exercise it, as you did in Lafayette Park through your designee, Bill Barr.
Yeah.
But you make those points and you say, I would like to get the documents that indicate what the White House did to respond to the rioting at the Congress. What did the White House do? What did anybody at the White House do about that? Anybody? Just give me the documents. Let's just see.
Right. Well, and all we have is documents from a few days prior saying we're setting up additional barriers to your using the National Guard, and it has to come from the acting Secretary of Defense is going to have to give a personal clearance if you intend to dispatch the National Guard. It's our intent to make it next to impossible for you to do this unless you got me on your side.
What's the plan for responding? Let's say, for the sake of argument, there's a terrorist attack on the Capitol.
There was.
Or the Pentagon.
Okay, yes.
What does the president do in response to that type of hypothetical attack? What's the plan? Is there a written plan? Does the president do anything? Does he just watch TV, or does he convene something in the Situation Room? What does he do?
Normally, yeah. I don't know exactly what the plan is, but I'm pretty sure my understanding has always been that there's written plans and protocols for just about every such
I'm sure
situation.
there are, David.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of question I would hypothetically ask as a House manager.
Yeah,
so
and
tell me, what happened?
I can't
Was
tell
the
you.
plan
I'll have to
activated?
kill
Did
you.
the president do anything?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the obvious question, and I guess they could, if they wanted to come and lie, they could say, sure, yeah, we activated all of that, and there was no outward evidence of it, but yeah.
Okay, but there's actually this process of senator questions, where Democratic senators can put these questions to them. Look, I don't expect an answer from Bruce Castor on this, but you make the point. The question makes the point, right?
I think so. Yeah, how come? You might ask that. And if you really do want an answer from Bruce Castor, I guess you could just ask, why didn't you present any evidence of that? That is weird. If you...
Right, well, that would really be exonerating evidence. Why would you hide that?
Yeah. What are you trying to do here to our former president? How dare you? I'm on his side. Why was there so much exculpatory evidence that you hid? I don't know how you want to put that. It clearly isn't how they would really approach it, but yeah, ask the question. I don't know. I'd read out that White House pool report. I retweeted that around just a little bit ago because I dug that up and I thought that was so interesting. And I took the screen grab of it, and that my tweet of it was when did I do this? January 16th. So 10 days after. Just saying, asking. And I think I did it a couple days before this too, but reiterating things. Is this really the kind of White House pool report you would expect to see during a violent siege that had already overwhelmed defenses at the Capitol and threatened to assassinate the vice president if the president didn't have some peculiar reason to believe that he was immune from attack? And the report is, let me call that up here too. Oh, I guess we lost Armando on that one. But, maybe you're still listening on the radio, but maybe power went out or you ran out of battery. It sounded like a weird disconnect. But the White House in-town pool report, number 11 in this case, on 6 January 2021, from Ann Guerin, the Washington Post reporter, filed at 3:12 p.m. And now lots of people have a better understanding of the timeline, and you can figure out where that fits in. White House in-town pool report number 11 for the day. No updates at the White House is the ostensible subject line title of this one. The White House is busy but calm. Busy but calm. With no developments here. Obviously, things are different at the Capitol. The Marine was outside the Oval Office entrance at 2:35 p.m., roughly when he sent this tweet. That is White House code for the Marine Guard is outside the Oval Office. That's the outward indication that the president at the time is in the Oval Office and, at work. So 2:35, Trump sends a tweet. He sends it from the Oval Office. That's what the Marines' presence tells us. There we go. Here comes Armando back again. Hi, Armando. You probably,
I don't
lost
know,
your
probably
signal
my
there or whatever.
connection fell, but
No
anyway,
problem.
you were in the middle.
Yeah, I was reading the White House pool report. So the pool report is sent at 3:12 p.m., covering events in the 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock hour. The White House is busy but calm with no developments here. Obviously, things are different at the Capitol. The Marine Guard is outside the Oval Office entrance, indicating that the president is in the Oval Office at 2:35 p.m. If everyone, if you know the timeline of things offhand. So he's in the White House, or rather in the Oval Office, when he sends this tweet. Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. So 2:35, and I'm sure that the defense, I'm guessing the defense wants to point to that. But Ann Gearin then signs off. I'll send out periodic updates from here, but as of now, there is nothing further on the president's schedule for today. He's not having a situation room meeting. He's not getting a briefing from national security people. He's not, maybe he is, they could argue, but it's not on the public schedule, whatever. But he's watching on TV and tweeting this. Even though I guess they'll point to it and say, well, it's a message of peace it doesn't say go home. It says, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. Stay peaceful. Of course, by this point, it's way too late for them to stay peaceful. But as opposed to everybody get out of there, or if you got 5 minutes and then I'm sending the troops, or I don't stand for this in my administration. None of that comes out. And the fact, again, that, I guess you could check all those protocols. What do you do in this case of a terrorist attack here, there? Well, I bet Twitter isn't in any of those protocols.
I would think not. But David, you see what you're doing? That's what the House managers have to do. If they need to weasel ways in, because the big thing that you would do, which is fight to get witnesses, you need to identify witnesses that are not, subject to different objections. You need to find evidence that you should be able to get that shouldn't be hard, and you use, frankly, since you've used them before, news reports of the activity of the White House at the time.
Yeah. Right, and this here is a particular kind of news report. It's not very detailed, but it is the on the ground, almost in the room, contemporaneous report of the White House pool reporter who is there. The job of this person is to report any unusual activity that should alert the rest of their colleagues to the need to report something.
Yep.
Ann Gearin here at 3:12 is saying, fellow reporters, there is nothing for you to do here at the White House. There is nothing going on. All the action is at the Capitol. Stay there.
I think that's really powerful stuff, and frankly should have been used if it has not been used. I would use it in closing if I could. I guess.
I don't know. I think now you've convinced me that I'm on the right track. But yeah, imagine as a discussion to say that there's an insurrection going on. And I think the managers kind of sort of made the point that, gosh, there should have been some leadership at this point from the president. And Raskin said, the president should have been calling for calm and coming out and reassuring the people of the United States. And all of that is kind of true. But, what also is missing is the reporter whose job it is to say, the White House says they're having a security briefing and no decisions have been made, but, they should have been able to say the president is meeting with the, Joint Chiefs of Staff and the cabinet or something. But instead, insurrection going on at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. And the word is they're not even talking about it.
Just think about it. And it just shows you how we got numb to Trump. Any other president would be
Yeah.
completely engaged in what are we doing to stop this.
Yeah, they'd be in the Situation Room. I mean, who and what? Since when does
The
Trump
White House
not
press
want?
room would be churning out
Yes.
statements. The president
Right.
is monitoring the situation and working with the mayor of D.C. to
Right.
do blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. When would Trump pass up a chance for photo ops in the Situation Room, looking at the screens surrounded by generals?
I think that your point is well taken. You've actually opened my eyes a little bit. I think that's something they can still probably do through the Democratic senators or in closing.
Well, we better tweet it to them because that's how national security decisions are made.
Good idea. All right, I'll leave you 30 minutes to the other business.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are in our final segment. Armando finally said, all right, I guess I better go get paid today and work on everything else. I think he's had a closer eye on the procedural rules, believe it or not, than I have had in a lot of this. I can untangle some of the messes, but he's been diving in and looking for ways to change or that might be available for House managers to change their approach. And it would be interesting, if I suppose there's no reason why Democratic senators couldn't confer with House managers as to what sorts of questions might be more or less helpful to them. If the questions are the last opportunity to introduce this line of thinking, I guess you could actually introduce it as a literal line of questioning in this. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Armando and I are the only ones that think that this is a big deal. There really was never a big response. I thought it would have made more sense to reporters, but then again, I'm just not that influential a person on Twitter, despite having a sizable following for a regular person on Twitter, and a lot of them being journalists. It just didn't catch on. But I thought it would make a good professional argument to all of them. The White House pool reporter, whose job it is to let other reporters essentially, maybe I understand the job differently. I'm not a member of the White House press, whatever it is, association, but my best guess at what the White House pool reporter is doing is there to alert them when any news is being made, and even when boring news is being made, just so that, you don't always have to be there hanging around the White House press room yourself, whatever number of you there are. A pool reporter will let you know the mundane things that are going on so you can keep up with all of that, but also in case of emergency, you can watch those White House pool reports and say, I got to get there myself and ask some questions about this. And Ann Guerin is saying there is nothing doing down here. No news. And there's no venue in the United States where it would be less appropriate to have no news being made at that time than the White House and the White House press office. And yet, there it is. And I'm surprised that didn't make a bigger impact among the reporters discussing any angle on this issue. Why is it that there was so little to report from the White House. And I mean, yeah, I guess that's part of the problem. Well, we don't have any evidence from the White House, or we don't have the ability to suss out exactly what was going on. Well, you can do it negatively. The fact is, there's no evidence about what activity there was at the White House because there was no activity at the White House. And there was no activity at the White House, one, because the president knows he's directing this coup and he's in no danger from it. And two, he didn't care probably didn't even really care whether the coup, quote unquote, succeeded or not. And he certainly didn't care whether any members of Congress were assassinated by it, even if they were Republicans. But they accidentally killed a bunch of Republicans, sir. Who cares? What do I care? I'm barely a Republican as it is. And someone was pointing out on Twitter yesterday, how did this come about? Well, I can comb through my own Twitter feed to find it. But somebody pointed out quite correctly that, when they released that video of Mitt Romney having his close encounter with the rioters and having to turn around and run the other direction, and it was offered up for the purpose of showing, what kind of danger senators faced. But this person made the other very interesting observation that Mitt Romney, and we understand how it happened, thanks to Trumpism, that Mitt Romney went from being the nominee for president of his party, the Republican Party, in 2012, to almost being murdered by Republican voters in, a couple of years. 2012, and then in 2021, he's nearly run down and murdered by Republican voters. Who was Thor Benson makes this observation. Who's Thor Benson? I better go and take a look. He's a writer, and he, featured in the Daily Beast, the Atlantic, Rolling Stone, Business Insider, and elsewhere. I don't know him. He don't know me, but good point. Thor Benson. Mitt Romney went from being the Republican nominee for president to almost being murdered by Republican voters in 8 years. I don't know what to say about that, but that's what happened. And then, of course, other people pushing back. What do you mean almost murdered? That's absurd. And to which our friend John Neffinger says, turn on your TV and then you'll know. But yeah, that is true. But it occurred to me, actually, really, everybody nominated by the National Republican Party in the last 8 years, so that would be anybody nominated for president or vice president by the National Party, right, for national office. Anybody nominated in the last 8 years who isn't Trump was under death threat from Republican voters. Not all necessarily on the 6th, because I would include in that, of course, Romney's vice presidential candidate, Paul Ryan. He wasn't there because, of course, he was no longer in Congress. But Ryan is reviled by hardcore Trump supporters early on, even during the first 2 years of the Trump administration. He's viewed as, essentially an internal enemy, and he won't do what Trump wants. But there were definitely death threats against Ryan. I suppose you could say, well, there's always death threats against high-ranking members of the government. Sometimes there's kooks everywhere, and that's why they have permanent security details, and I guess it's in that sense a matter of course. And no, he wasn't there on that day. But I guess if he were and was still Republican leader and was trying to tamp down on the effort to challenge the votes, I don't know if he would have been. I mean, he might have been more like McCarthy, but from out of office, he says he wouldn't be. So you can't really tell. But it doesn't matter. While he was in office, he was the subject of threats and disparagement and even death threats from Trump supporters and Republicans. So Romney, Paul Ryan, and then, of course, Mike Pence, they said, let's hang him. So that's the totality of the people who have been nominated for national office by the Republicans in the last 8 years who aren't Trump. Right? I mean, I guess if you went back a little further, the 2008 nominees, I guess you could say with some certainty McCain would probably be on that list if he were still alive. I don't know that that's the case necessarily with Sarah Palin. They may say, well, we don't need to kill her. She's brain dead. What's the difference? But I think she's still I guess, still kind of sort of okay with Trump supporters. I don't think they have any serious disagreements with her because she's never done anything serious to disagree with. She hasn't held power in any sense, certainly not during the Trump administration, and barely held power even when she was supposed to be holding power. But basically, anyway, the point of that to me was everybody nominated by the National Party in the last 8 years who isn't Trump has become the subject of death threats from Republican voters. And in case you're wondering, this is, I guess, about whether the Republican Party has become irretrievably Trumpified, I guess that's the answer. Basically, anybody who held our party standard in the last 8 years who isn't Trump is now under death threat. We hate them. They're disgusting and blah, blah, blah. So, I think that's probably worth acknowledging at some point. We're probably not going to dig these people out from the mess they've made for themselves. All right. I think we are best served at this point, not necessarily by combing through the rest of the Washington Post story, but you have the weekend to do that. I think we got all we needed to out of that one. We probably even got all we needed to out of the nuclear football story. But again, I recommend that to you just to watch Fred Kaplan go through the process of coming to believe that was really a serious danger. And again, to sum things up for you in case you don't want to spend the time on it, he initially has people point out to him that I think that he's got the nuclear football with him. Look at this person here in what you can't really tell from the angle of this shot, but you can't disprove it either. This is a person in Air Force uniform. It certainly looks like it could be, but a shot from the side would be helpful from that. From the back, an Air Force uniform looks like a blue suit. So, but he's got this big satchel with him, and that could be the nuclear football. But first, you have to be sure that a vice president would in fact be in possession of one. And it's interesting to read Kaplan's recounting of his research that leads him to the conclusion that they do. Or at least in modern practice they do, but it wasn't always the case. There's some interesting history, some good facts there, good trivia about it. And then, of course, laying out the facts that lead you to understand that, no, if rioters had seized the thing, they couldn't launch nuclear weapons. It doesn't consist of a button that you press, and that's that. There are some codes and some contact information in there that basically you would say if for whatever reason, the word reaches the vice president that the president's been incapacitated and there's a need for a nuclear launch, all the information you need is in there for you to make contact with the Pentagon, give them an authentication code, and they would say, all right, this is truly the vice president in communication with me or someone speaking on his behalf. They have the codes that are only available to him physically in his presence, but I assume they would be able to tell maybe whether they're talking to the vice president personally or not. And I guess decisions would be made if they thought that wasn't the case. But they would also know that getting a call from the vice president that says launch the nuclear codes is of no effect if the Pentagon has no reason to believe the president himself has not been incapacitated. So a call out of the blue from the vice president or someone pretending to be the vice president isn't going to launch anything. And just so that you're aware, I think it probably would have made an impact to say, these idiots, when they were done smearing feces on the wall downstairs, could have gotten a hold of a nuclear football. And there was that story the other day, the other week, whenever it was, of the one woman who came into possession, I think just you could just say stole the laptop out of Nancy Pelosi's office and allegedly moved to offer it for sale to some Russians of some kind, whether they were directly in the security services or not, I don't know. There's, of course, holes in that story, as there are in any story. But I guess it would be something, the nuclear football, though you couldn't launch anything with it. You wouldn't want to sell that to the Russians. That would not be a good idea. I think that would pose some security problems. Okay, other stories of some interest. Let's spend at least a few minutes on this one. New York Times reports yesterday, to no one's surprise. Really, Trump was sicker than acknowledged with COVID-19. Although I guess it is to some people's surprise, because I still get tweets occasionally as I compile the numbers about how many people have become sick with COVID-19 and how many have died of COVID-19 since Trump made what I still maintain is his most depraved and sick lie of his career, both before and after becoming president, that he was going to give a miracle cure for COVID-19 to he said every senior, every vulnerable senior in America, but I guess arguably just about anybody in America who was in need of it because they were sick with COVID-19. He had discovered the miracle cure of Regeneron. He credited it for saving his life, and he was going to give it to every American who needed it because he was such a magnanimous God king. And instead, he gave it to virtually no one. There is some mechanism by which people can somehow access it if you know the right people and know the right places and the right buttons to push. But then there's also evidence that no, it isn't exactly what it was promised to be anyway. What do you know? Trump overplayed his hand on that too. But even so, I think maybe a stronger point is just saying, he promised to do something proactively for everybody in America, arguably at the lowest point of the pandemic. The president himself has been stricken down with this thing, which he, idiotically thought of as a hoax and whatever, but it would have been, no one can doubt the symbolic damage that would be done to have even big mouth a-hole President Donald Trump die from COVID in the middle of this thing. And when he was in danger of doing that, even though they downplayed the threat, everyone sort of knew it. That's the no surprise to anyone angle on this. Everybody knew that he was a candidate for death from the get-go when we started to find out who was COVID killing. Elderly, overweight people with heart problems. That's your guy, Donald Trump, right? And it was just a matter of, will this virus get close enough to him? And then when it became obvious that he was going to be an idiot about it and dare the virus to kill him, then I guess no surprise. Well, anyway, so he promises Regeneron to everybody. Long story short on that one, 20 million people have caught COVID-19 since he said that A, he had his hands on the miracle cure, and B, was going to give it to everybody. 20 million people have caught it. There were 7 million something cases of COVID reported anyway, in the entire United States when he got out of the hospital and cut that stupid video that I still would like to know whether it was really on the White House lawn or in front of a green screen. And now that we know how much sicker he was, maybe that's evidence for it being a green screen, although why he couldn't, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, 20 million additional people have got, there's 28 million reported cases in the United States now. Nobody really, except me, I guess, stops and realizes 72%, I calculated it out last night, 72% of all the cases during the entire pandemic in the United States, 72% of them came after Trump got out of the hospital, announced that there was a miracle cure, and he was going to give it to everybody for free. 20 million additional people. And we're right about the point, 270,000 people have died since he said, nobody needs to die. There's a miracle cure. They gave it to me. I'll give it to you for free. More than 250,000 additional dead since he said he was going to do that. And then what did he do? Again, stuck his thumb up his ass and went golfing and has done jack squat since then. That's why I say it's the sickest thing he could have done, to tell people at the low point of this pandemic that he was going to save them all. And not only was that a lie, but he didn't even make an effort to look like he was doing something. He forgot it as soon as he said it. And la-di-da, and went on his way. The most disgusting person in the world. May he fall into a wood chipper yet today. Anyway. So here's the report. Trump was sicker than acknowledged with COVID-19. Subheader: when he was hospitalized with the coronavirus in October, his blood oxygen levels had plunged, and officials feared he was on the verge of being placed on a ventilator, which still at the time was pretty much, you were making reservations at the funeral home at that point. If you went on a ventilator, you probably weren't coming off. It was October. I don't know. I guess by that point they had figured out how to get people off the ventilator. I got that wrong. I guess maybe like March, April, May, you were pretty much dead on you were dead meat if you went on a ventilator. Okay, so the reporters here: Noah Weiland, Maggie Haberman, Mark Mazzetti, and Annie Carney on this piece here. President Donald J. Trump was sicker with COVID-19 in October than publicly acknowledged. No crap on that. And publicly acknowledged at the time, with extremely depressed blood oxygen levels at one point and a lung problem associated with pneumonia caused by the coronavirus. According to 4 people familiar with his condition, his prognosis became so worrisome that he was taken to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. We know about that. That officials, this was before he was taken to the hospital, that officials believed he would need to be put on a ventilator. 2 of the people familiar with his condition said. The people familiar with Mr. Trump's health said he was found to have lung infiltrates. Is that the right pronunciation? It makes it sound awkward, but that's what the word is spelling. Lung infiltrates, which occur when the lungs are inflamed and contain substances such as fluid or bacteria. Their presence, especially when a patient is exhibiting other symptoms, can be a sign of an acute case of the disease. They can be easily spotted on an X-ray or scan when parts of the lungs appear opaque or white. Mr. Trump's blood oxygen level alone was cause for extreme concern, dipping into the 80s, according to people familiar with his evaluation. The disease is considered severe when the blood oxygen level falls into the low 90s. He's past that. It has been previously reported that Mr. Trump had trouble breathing and had a fever on October 2nd. The day he was taken to the hospital, and the types of treatment he received indicated that his condition was serious, but the new details about his condition and about the effort inside the White House to get him special access to an unapproved drug to fight the virus helped to flesh out one of the most dire episodes of Mr. Trump's presidency. Boy, he really should have died in that one. The new revelations about Mr. Trump's struggle with the virus also underscore the limited and sometimes misleading nature of the information disclosed at the time about his condition. Par for the course, no pun intended. The former president resisted being taken from the White House to Walter Reed, relenting when aides told him that he could walk out on his own or risk waiting until the U.S. Secret Service was forced to carry him out if he got sicker, 2 people familiar with the event said. Of course, he'd want to avoid the optics of that. Understandable. While Mr. Trump was hospitalized at Walter Reed, his medical team sought to downplay the severity of the situation, saying that he was on an upswing. At 74 and overweight, he was at risk for severe disease and was prescribed an aggressive course of treatments. He left the hospital after 3 days, in which he at one point staged a brief ride in his armored sport utility vehicle to wave at the crowd of supporters outside the building. You all remember that. A person close to the former president denied that he had been seriously ill, echoing comments Mr. Trump himself made after he was sick. And of course, if Trump is going to make that comment, it's not true. Okay. A person we just read that one. There were still unanswered questions about whether Mr. Trump was already sick with COVID-19 when he participated in a presidential debate on September 29th. Just 2 days before the public announcement that he had been diagnosed with the disease, and 3 days before his deteriorating condition forced him to go to Walter Reed. By the way, I should say, my incomplete thought from before, when I recount the number of people who have gotten COVID or died since he promised the Regeneron, people still tweet me and say, I still don't believe he really had it. I still think he staged the whole thing to make it look like he could defeat the disease. So this would tend to argue against that a little bit. Anyway, let's see. Still unanswered questions, right? Then did he go to the debate with COVID? Trump's physician, Sean Conley, right, repeatedly downplayed concerns about Trump's condition during his illness. At one briefing, Conley said Trump was receiving X-ray and CT scans, but when asked about whether there was evidence of pneumonia or damage to the tissue, he would only say there were, quote, expected findings, but nothing of major clinical concern. And in fact, of course, there were signs of serious clinical concern. Conley also told reporters that while Trump's oxygen level had dropped to 93%, it had never dropped to the low 80s. And I guess there's no evidence that it was in the low 80s, but even, the point is, if it's in the high 80s, you're in serious trouble. In fact, if you're in the low 90s, you're in serious trouble. But all he does is say, well, while it had dropped to 93%, it never went to the low 80s. All right, well, how about the high 80s? No, glossed right past it. So good eliding there, Dr. Conley. Trump had trouble breathing at the White House. He was twice given oxygen before being taken to Walter Reed, as Conley acknowledged after it was reported by the New York Times. While still at the White House, Trump received a drug developed by the biotechnology firm Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. So he got it while at the White House. That's interesting and becomes important later on. The antibody cocktail, not widely available at the time, helps people infected with the virus fight it off. After Trump was hospitalized, he began a regimen for a steroid, dexamethasone, which is usually recommended only for COVID-19 patients who have severe or critical forms of the disease. And I think we did learn that at the time. Often those who need mechanical ventilation or supplemental oxygen will get this stuff. And he received a 5-day course of the antiviral drug remdesivir. Medical experts at the time believed that this medication, or his medication course, was a clear signal of significant issues related to his lungs. In news conferences outside the hospital that weekend, Dr. Conley offered data that made it appear that his patient was recovering quickly. He noted that Trump had fared well on spirometry, I guess, a spirometry test, which measures lung capacity. He's maxing it out, Dr. Conley said. He's doing great. Medical experts say a spirometry test, if I got the pronunciation right, is virtually meaningless with COVID-19 patients. So thanks a lot. Mark Meadows, then White House Chief of Staff, tried to surreptitiously tell reporters that the situation was more dire. And when he did that, Trump erupted in anger, and probably through coughing fits, according to people who spoke with him. On Sunday, October 4th, Conley acknowledged that he had given a rosy version of Trump's condition. I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the president, his course of illness has had. He said, it's a nonsensical statement, I didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction. And in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something which wasn't necessarily true. Even that statement is trying to hide something. He's basically, if you're taking what he's saying here at face value, he's saying, I didn't want to depress the president and cause his illness to become more serious by saying it was what it was. He wanted to be upbeat. The power of prayer, maybe. Trump's medical team said that on Friday he had a high fever. His oxygen level had dropped, requiring him to be administered oxygen. His oxygen level dropped again on Saturday. Trump appeared to still be struggling with the disease when he returned to the White House, where he stationed himself on a balcony in a choreographed scene, tearing off his mask and saluting his helicopter, which makes no sense. Doctors at the time noted how Mr. Trump used his neck muscles to help him breathe in those moments, a classic sign that someone's lungs are not taking in enough oxygen. On the night of his diagnosis, October 1st, White House officials scrambled to get the Regeneron antibody cocktail, not at that point authorized by the FDA for treatment, and get it to Trump. A top lawyer in the White House counsel's office, Patrick Philbin, called Dr. Stephen Hahn, the FDA commissioner at the time, to discuss how the agency could approve the drug's use for 2 senior administration officials he didn't want to identify, according to one person who heard about the call. Philbin was exploring how the president could quickly get access to the drug through normal FDA procedures. Regeneron had already signed off on the use of the doses, Philbin told Dr. Hahn. Dr. Hahn and other FDA officials, including Dr. Patrizia Cavazzoni, the top federal drug regulator, worked to clear the drug through a standard process known as Emergency Investigational New Drug Application, used often for very ill patients who agree to take an experimental drug still being tested in clinical trials, etc., etc. But basically, here's what it comes down to. Regeneron ships a package of doses that included extras in case of any administration issues, a company spokeswoman said. The extras, by the way, never returned. Connolly at one point told associates they'd been sitting in a refrigerator in the White House's medical office. And you never know when you would need more. That's true. Only in the days following the application's approval did White House officials acknowledge that the doses were for Mr. Trump and for First Lady Melania Trump, who had also tested positive. A person close to the former president also denied that Mrs. Trump had turned down the use of the drug, which is apparently what was initially reported in those days. Around that time, as other people close to Trump started getting sick, his son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, offered to facilitate getting the Regeneron treatment for them. Two people with knowledge of the discussion said. An aide to Mr. Kushner now disputes that he made any such offer at the time. But basically, this thing now concludes in saying, yes, all sorts of rules were bent in getting him that treatment. Two, that it didn't happen in the hospital. It happened at the White House, and he was already on oxygen at the White House. And then this conclusion. In the weeks after his hospitalization, Trump was convinced that the Regeneron treatment had saved his life, telling aides, "I'm proof it works." That line became a running joke among top health officials who would ask each other whether anyone was going to break it to Trump that he was in fact a failed clinical trial result for Regeneron, since the aim of Regeneron is to prevent people from being hospitalized after receiving it, one former senior administration official said. So maybe that's why he dropped the whole thing and walked away. It wasn't the miracle cure he said it was. It didn't do what it was supposed to do, and it didn't keep him out of the hospital. I mean, that's one good reason to drop the whole thing, but not to say nothing and then walk away and play golf.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, Justice Putnam is next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He'll be covering, I'm sure, lots more about the impeachment trial, plus lots more from around the country and around the world. Darwin, yes, has the question about how can you do the things that Republican senators are doing, meeting with the trial team, and still stay impartial? The answer is no rules against it.